How's it going, everybody? Welcome back. It's been a little bit. Apologies, things have been kind of crazy lately, but getting it back together. If you enjoy the content on this channel, this is just the housekeeping section. Please hit the subscribe button on YouTube. If you want to support what's happening here on Locally Sourced, you can go to the Patreon. It's patreon.com/locally sourced. You can become a member. Nothing is paywalled ever, so don't worry. You can get it whether you pay or not. But again, if you like the content, you want to support it, that's your best way to do it. With that out of the way, today my guest is a friend that I have made through NH Talk. Everybody knows him through his handle Cephographic, or as he's better known, David Bates. And he's going to be joining me today, and we're going to just sort of shoot the shit a little bit. So with that, David,
what's going on?
Yeah, exactly. So welcome. So I'm excited because I feel like for most of us, the experience with you is in these very short little clips. And like, I've been dying to have like a longer form conversation with you because I feel like so much gets like cut on, like left on the cutting room floor when we're doing our little short form content.
Yeah, New Hampshire Talk is full of people that I would love to sit down with for an hour or two and have coffee. And like, we cannot put that into our schedules because we're all adults.
Yeah, not only are we adults, but we're all like literally like completely across the state. And sometimes that means traveling like an hour and a half just to like get coffee. And you're like, damn, dude.
The vast Pacific of New Hampshire. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. I think the best place for us to start right now is that you have a lot of like institutional experience, just like working in politics, and like maybe like just so that for people to get like a general overview, let's just like get some context on like how you ended up in politics and then like whatever path you took to get out of it, or like to what extent you've removed yourself from it and why, and all of that.
Okay. Well, I grew up in New Hampshire. I was born at Laconia Hospital. So I think you're also a native. There's very few of us. New Hampshire is overwhelmingly, I think it's almost a supermajority of people were born somewhere else. So we're outnumbered.
Yeah.
And so I went to school. I got a political science degree. I went to New England College, and I went to UNH and got a master's degree in history after working for a little while at the public defender's office as a legal assistant. And when I was at UNH, I studied American history, and I focused on because you try to do primary source research. And I've always been extremely interested in politics. And one of the interesting things that happened in the mid-20th century was the sort of consolidation of both parties into more ideological outfits than they used to be. They were sort of more defined by region, ethnicity, religion, social factors. And so each party had a really well-defined sort of like liberal and conservative wing that were both very strong. And so the time period I studied in New Hampshire in the 50s, 60s, and 70s was a time when that was shifting. And so you started with this really strongly defined, like the Democrats are the party of the Catholic labor that was imported for the mills. Yeah. And a couple of like farmers who didn't realize that Andrew Jackson wasn't still in office, and immigrants from Southern Europe, and French Canada, and then the Republican Party, pretty much from Portland, Maine to Portland, Oregon, is sort of the Protestant Northern white party, and so as social movements roll through the country, it's reflected differently in those two facets. And New Hampshire has this really like interesting thing. So I could talk about that a lot. Obviously, I found it extremely fascinating. After I finished my degree, I ended up working at the legislature, the New Hampshire legislature, as a nonpartisan committee researcher in the House. So I got to know a lot of people sort of firsthand, and just from sitting in meetings all day, every day for 3 years. I sort of, it was my job to like know the history of the bills that were moving through. So I would go to all the meetings. I would sit there. I would listen to the arguments on both sides. It was a little frustrating because this was the period right after Donald Trump was elected. And it was very hard to be quietly nonpartisan.
Yeah, I can see that.
I always took my work really seriously as like, you're serving the people of New Hampshire, and these are the people that the people of New Hampshire sent, and you're there to help all of them. And honestly, they're pretty good about not trying to use you in a weird partisan way that makes you feel uncomfortable. Your personal beliefs are almost secondary to what they're asking you to do. But it was a little difficult. And so I had begun, I think partly just because of the example of all the people there are many extraordinary people working in the legislature, and many of them are involved in local government. I had started to get more involved in local government. And I ended up getting very involved after I left. I was dismissed without explanation just before COVID hit. And that's something that will drive you insane, but it is the kind of petty.
Totally.
And it's like I might have like angered somebody that the speaker needed on a vote. It's like the legislative staff. There's sort of eruptions of news stories every 2 or 3 years where someone's like, "I can't believe you were treated like that." It's like, yeah, you don't have the sort of rights of a normal employee, and the people who are in charge of you are certainly not trained to be employers in decent HR sense. So it's extremely variable how well you're treated. Just
like any good work environment.
There was a legislator that kept trying to push to unionize the legislative staff, and it never went through all the way.
That would have been kind of nice, though. I mean, I don't know. That's like the union member in me.
Yeah,
you should do it.
Yeah, right. But the majority party in both chambers is often Republicans, and they might feel weird about unionized workforces, period, let alone.
Yeah, true.
You have to maintain their trust. So I don't know. So after that, I left, and it allowed me to sort of participate more directly in politics. So I'd sort of like built up this head of steam, and the chair of the Democratic Party in Warner really wanted to stop. She had been doing it for decades. And she's like, you would be a good person to just take this over. And honestly, she hadn't had the passion to really run an organization for some time. It had been multiple cycles where she was sort of in charge of finding people to stand outside the polls with signs, but there wasn't an organization there. And so I really enjoyed organizing, I found. And I had done a lot of field work in my youth when I was a canvasser for Mass Equality, which was trying to protect gay marriage in Massachusetts when Mitt Romney wanted to overturn it. I had been living down there with my wife in 2006, and I worked with them. And so I had a lot of, going to events and having people sign things, knocking on doors, making phone calls, sitting down and being like, I'm going to make 1,000 phone calls, and then doing it.
Yeah.
To talk about a hot button social issue, so like I had a poorly developed sense of shyness, and it was sort of more natural for me to do organizing things. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about like, what is a town party? What should a Democratic town party be? What is the Democratic Party? What should that look like?
Right.
I was the chair through 2 cycles, and I was pretty active relative to a lot of other people who were involved. We put together like an email list. There was a regular newsletter. We did fundraising. One of the things I was really passionate about was sort of making sure that no one had to fundraise. So for state reps, sort of local organizations that have good roots in their community can usually do enough small dollar fundraising that your state representative doesn't have to put in any money. And it meant a lot to me that someone could be a waitress, Someone could be a secretary at a real estate office, or a carpenter or something. If you had a profession or an occupation where you could swing the hours to do the actual work, then it didn't matter if you could write a $5,000 check or fundraise $5,000, $6,000 for your state representative race. And so we focused really hard on that. And then I started moving up the chain. I was like, okay, we figured out how to fund state representative races. We're in a gerrymandered Senate district, but it's one of the more achievable Senate districts for Democrats. And we have to find a way to like mount better challenges. And so we started working on, well, how are you going to fund the Senate races, which can cost $150,000 to $300,000. So that's like a big step up. And it was in the midst of working on that I got first burned out, and then I started having some. My son is struggling with some stuff, and so I had to step back a little bit from politics. So I have a lot of like, well, we experimented with this, and this is what we got, and it was pretty good. Maybe if we put more energy into that, it would work. But so in the course of both those things, I also was working with the Merrimack County Democrats, starting new Democratic town community parties in towns where there weren't any, sort of through doing intensive field work. You take everyone that's voted in a Democratic primary, whether they're independent or Democrat or whatever, and you say, hey, there's a new local Democratic Party starting. Do you want to be on the email list for it? And then, if you've gone through very thoroughly, even in a very red town, you have several hundred emails of people who said that they wanted to be in touch with it. And not everyone wants to go to a meeting, but you would call people to a meeting. And from the people who showed up, you would sort of work with them in terms of creating a cohesive group that could then, support House candidates and recruit House candidates, if nothing else.
And then probably also, I would imagine, like disseminate information that occurred in those meetings out to people that like had expressed interest but weren't necessarily able to make it because they like had to take their kid to dance class or something like that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And also just the major problem with state news, which I mean you're helping with right here, is that there's like a titanic wave of federal news that reaches us every day, and it's extremely dramatic. And so without even trying, it finds you. And if you think about even those of us who are very focused on New Hampshire, still like well over 80% of the political content, if not more, that we see every day, without even trying, is federal. It's so hard to have a pipeline for just keep people in touch with what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, it just to sort of tack onto that a little bit. It's like, I'm always saying this to people. I'm like, look, like, if you think that national candidates just come out of nowhere, you should probably get your head checked. Like they start out in more local positions and you work your way up. That's like, actually, I mean, it generally speaking, and like, not necessarily trying to open a whole can of worms here, but that's like, I've heard that is like one of the main like points of contention that people have with John Kuiper, is that he's like never held a state rep position or like a Senate position. So it's like, well, you've never done this before. So like, you don't have that institutional knowledge to go and engage with this. And like, why, so there's the lack of support there. And I mean, that sort of begs a different question of like, well, is there truly value in the institutional knowledge? Like we as the public aren't exposed to that, so we don't necessarily have a comprehensive understanding of how that institutional knowledge either like hurts us or benefits us, in either direction. You know what I mean? Right. Like it's just sort of this sealed box, and it feels very like trust me bro kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's kind of interesting, right? Because the party is set up in some ways to be extremely easy to walk into, and you can gain some power within the party just by saying yes and walking into it. I found myself on the state committee through no desire of my own. I I was interested in the party because like I'm sort of like very obsessed with how do you have people work together, right? Unlike a lot of people, I think in politics, it's harder for me to like do confrontation and fight, and I often, don't even use a battle vocabulary when I try to talk about politics. Yeah. I'm like obsessed with the Iroquois League, and all that. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Sorry.
There we go. No, you're good.
Yeah. But like, how do you make people work together? And a lot of people are activated into politics by anger and fear, and they come into politics with a lot of trust issues. So like, how do you have an institution that's worth trusting, right? And then how do you trust the strangers or the semi-strangers that you're cooperating with? Like, these are like the sort of the really interesting questions to me. So I ended up thinking a lot about the institution.
That's I think about that a lot, actually. That's something that really like there was I don't know if you're familiar with, there's a YouTube channel called Doom Scroll, hosted by this guy Josh Citarella, and he does interviews with like pretty big people in, like generally across the spectrum, but I think he's like self-identifies as like a social democrat in like a very traditional sense. And he was having, I can't remember who the interview was with, but he was having a conversation about like the argument for gatekeepers. You know what I mean? Like, I think it was actually, funny enough, I think it was Tim Heidecker from the Tim and Eric Awesome Show. And it was like, they were discussing sort of like those early days of Adult Swim, but really before like the internet took off, and how there was a certain amount of like institutional granting of permission to experiment and explore, and that was what like, and if something worked or didn't work, it would determine whether or not it like kept going, you know what I mean? And and so I find that super fascinating, because it's like, there's a huge portion of me that's like, well, you need to be critical of systems of power, because like, they will like, left to their own devices, eventually they will sort of corrupt, right? But by the same token, it's like, look, like if I want to like I'm not a fucking doctor, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not a scientist. So I kind of need to trust doctors and scientists when they're telling me about something like medical or research related, So it's like, there's this really interesting over under. And like, I think people tend to want to like put this into like a black, white, grayscale type of a spectrum. And I'm always just like, look, like it doesn't work like that. You can't force things into these strange dichotomies. You kind of have to go like issue by issue. And like, finding a middle point does not necessarily make one a centrist, you know what I mean? And that's like nuance that gets really like truncated out of the discussion a lot of the time. You know what I mean?
Well, and it's so I think what you said was perfect. Like, it's a black box. And you get to see more of it when you're sort of on the inside, right? But at the same time, the party has many mechanisms that force it to be open. And at the same time, everyone wants to be a general, including people who have never done anything politically or won anything. And so there is a little bit of when you get to a certain level, and I think John started at this level, which is hard. There is a sort of like, okay, you have a lot of like things to tell us about what we're doing wrong and what you're doing right. Can you prove any of that? Yeah. And then it's sort of like, waiting. So, there's like a balance between openness and you need to make choices at some level about what might work and what might not work. So it's a very interesting thing. And also, like, many of the things that make it open are not broadcast widely. So if you're not interested in the party or involved in the party, you don't know that that's there. Like,
exactly.
someone, so like some of the things that make it open, let me talk about the things that make it open, and then I'll maybe talk about the things, maybe that's a good way to structure it. Like,
Sure.
Anyone can join their town committee, right? And there's a committee in almost every town. If there isn't a committee in your particular community, just finding 2 other people and notifying the town party that you want to caucus and form a committee allows you to form a committee. You have to put up notices in your community saying, hey, this is happening. If you're a registered Democrat, you can come. Independents are welcome, but unless you're a registered Democrat, you won't have a vote at the caucus to choose a chair. So it's relatively open in the sense that, like, I was registered as an independent before I joined my local party because why not, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Gives you more options.
Certainly makes it a pain every time you vote because you have to walk back over to the table to re-register as independent. But yeah, you know,
and a lot of people forget. It's really interesting how people are. Like, you and I are very intense about politics, but for most people, this is like an unpleasant dentist appointment that they have every 2 years, and they're like, yeah.
Right.
So yes. So anyone can re-register as a Democrat just by like talking to their town clerk. So really, there's nothing preventing someone. And in most towns, this is a little bit different in larger cities where they have like much bigger, like Manchester is a little less penetrable. But like a lot of New Hampshire is rural communities of just a few thousand people. And you're talking about, if there is an established committee, there may be 10 or 15 people in the core group, if that. In a lot of
I was going to say, if you're lucky, you're getting 10 to 15.
Right. Yeah. And so, you know, once you're chair, you have access to the statewide voter database. Not to the full extent, but you can get a lot of information on the people in your town. And you can set up your own canvases and phone banks, and you're sort of in charge. Like, you're elected by the people of your town. This party doesn't tell you what to do, and you're operating under the New Hampshire Democrats' Constitution, but really the only thing involved in that is stay neutral in primaries. If you're a party, really the local party gets to choose all its own projects, all its own emphasis, all its own messaging. You're sort of like the field operation in your community, and you're in charge because you're responsible to the people of your community. And then they give you tools and access. And I was really aggressive with being like, hey, you know, like, will you sit down with me and talk about fundraising? Head of the New Hampshire fundraising thing. Like, they were very happy. Like, they loved it if you were like, give me more skills, give me more information. They were very helpful. Oftentimes people run into problems when they're sort of like asking for expensive resources to be given to them. And they get really angry that those expensive resources, it's like, dude, there's 200 towns. Like, there's no way this. And the other thing, you know, so that's one of the things that makes it very open. And they changed it to be even more open in that the chairs of the Democratic Party in each town are now automatically on the state committee, along with any elected state representative. So the state committee exists, and it has about 300 or 400 members. And there's like all these categories of people, and that puts you on the state committee. Our senators, I think, get to each appoint 3 people to the state committee. The chair gets to appoint 10 people just because they're designees of the chair. But those categories of like, you're a big important person, so you get to appoint a certain number of people, are dwarfed by the number of people that are on it just because they're involved in a county party, their chairs, their state representatives. So it was recently expanded from 300 or 400 to like 500 or 600 people. And so that's one of the ways it's very open. And when you're on the state committee, you're in charge of electing the officers that run the party. And there's open dialogue. Like, a lot of this happens in like closed Facebook groups for the town chairs. You can get more information. It's easy to network with people because their name is all in a list. You have a sort of an unlimited license to contact and talk to anyone. As you're pursuing your things. And one of the ways that you become more visible is by working on projects. like the chair of the Hampton Democrats, Erica DeVries, is a professional fundraiser for nonprofits. And she ran a long running program for 3 or 4 years that was meant to help local town parties become more effective, where she would teach them sort of like how to do a form of grassroots fundraising. And, you know, like Claremont, like not a wealthy town, was able to raise like $30,000 to fund like its party operations. And it was great. Like the Merrimack
That's
County
incredible.
Yeah, like the Merrimack County Democrats did it when I was on it, and we had a very imperfect effort, but we still raised, I think, $30,000 to give to the House races that were closest. We took the districts that were like, these are the closest districts. We're going to give them an extra $2,000 each to these campaigns to try to help them get over the line. And I was always like down with party fundraising, but like in the course of sort of co-leading that effort, I called like and talked to basically every Democratic representative in Merrimack County. I talked to the mayor of Concord. I talked to Colin Van Ostern. I talked to state senators. Like, you know, like you end up talking to all these people. You have sort of an unlimited license to socialize. And the grassroots network is very much made up of people who are always trying to like cooperate to make things happen. And so you get to be well known if you're putting a lot of energy into it and cooperating with people.
Right.
The close
quick sidebar really quick, just because it came up as I was listening, and I think this is actually sort of interesting, and I'm just sort of like, I want to get your read on it, because I could be wrong when I make this general assertion. But there's like, I've heard from candidates, right, that like if you want to get access to voter information, like say you're running, you know, if you're running as a Democrat and you want to get access to voter information, if you're a candidate, you got to pay like $70,000 or something like that to get access to that. But what I'm hearing from you in this context is that if you shift it down, right, to the like individual committee level on a town per town basis, you're actually able to get that information basically for nothing.
Oh yeah.
So it's like that almost seems like a bit of a loophole that could be exploited by candidates that like in a more like grassroots fashion, where like, let's say like, so you've got sort of the broader, you know, like as all sort of within the context of NH Talk, right? You've got the broader NH Talk coalition that exists, and everybody is trying to engage in their particular community. And it seems like a possible way to like engage in a degree of power seizure in terms of like rolling out potential like campaign appeals to get candidates more visibility to like the actual like Democratic constituency. We're not talking about the independents right now, but like, I mean, just like,
Yeah. Like, so, you know, like I told you, like, I was really interested in like making sure that the party, there was no private fundraising that had to happen. One of the other things we did was sort of like all these groups do is ask candidates to come and talk. And one of the things we further did in the Warner Democrats was publish a voter guide where all the candidates were given equal space. So it was like one of the things that candidates do when they have big disparities in resources between them is the wealthier candidate is able to buy attention. But
right, exactly.
If you literally like print or email a voter guide to every Democrat, and also are working aggressively to try to get people, remind them to come to your primary, you know, you are like, hey man, here's like a brief synopsis of all the candidates running, you know, 3 paragraphs. This is their website. Here's 3 YouTube videos of them. And it sort of levels that playing field. So I was sort of proactively neutral. And you can never do that in a way that quite satisfies everyone. I remember someone like unsubscribed very noisily from my list because they were a very strong Cindy Warmington advocate, and they didn't like any of the bad press. And I'm like, look, I gave you all the news stories. You know, it's not my fault.
Yeah.
There were a couple of bad news stories about Cindy.
Don't shoot the messenger side of things. Things I've experienced.
On the more, you know, what you were saying in terms of more like seizure. Yeah, it's a very open system.
It just seems really like it seems like something, and not to cut you off, but I just to really get to the meat of the point that I was making is I hear a lot of times from people that exist within the more left-wing progressive movements. We just had an exchange about identifying with labels and whatnot. But basically, for it just to make a generalization, something I hear super frequently is we need parallel structures of power. You can't just assume that you're building within the system, and this actually seems like a very interesting way to sort of split the difference, right? Because you can. For those out there that aren't totally against a concept of entryism, right? I think this is a very interesting way to bit of information that says look, you could ostensibly find some sort of activist in every single town and then say okay, we're going to get together and we're going to all join our local committees so that we can all get access to that sort of voter base, right? We can all get that information, and then we can basically do exactly what the Republicans do, which is pool all that information. You can do it in a sort of a parallel way that would allow the more progressive candidates to build some kind of broader database that's maybe even searchable to a certain extent, that would allow this sort of progressive structure to exist in parallel to the more formally democratic established path. Am I making sense here?
No, yeah, you are. And I mean, so there's different actors, right, that are interested in that information. And one of the things that has happened repeatedly is that people have taken that information out of the system and just stolen it and sold it for private gain.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Not for any, beautiful political cause, but just steal it. And so when that happens, it makes the people who put information into the system more hesitant to do that. And then the system dies.
Sure. That makes sense.
The more the system is it actually, from talking to the people in the party, and I have no reason to believe, because this was not the context we were having this conversation in, that they were misleading me or anything like that. It's a bit of a delicate dance for them to get information flowing into this voter database. It's very expensive for them to acquire it, and they have to put in place certain safeguards. And a lot of what people maybe don't realize outside the black box is that we're in the middle of a 8-year effort maybe to open these things up and make them easier for the grassroots to use. It used to be that the security they had around the database was so tight that it was extremely difficult for someone on the ground to use it in any meaningful way.
That tracks.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, when you join a Democratic Party and you're the chair, you get access to your community, and then you can randomly look up any individual you want in the state.
Right.
And that's sort of, so you can do quick background checks if you have to on anyone who's coming in. I think, the entryism discussion is always really interesting to me in terms of the parallel structures. And I'm I don't think that it's ever unnecessary, right? Because the two parties are operated almost like public utilities, or they should ideally be almost like public utilities, right? Because we're stuck in our first past the post system with someone's going to get to 51%. And so historically we put ourselves in a straitjacket in terms of our democracy, and it would be great to change that.
The amount of times I've wished that we were more parliamentary is I just anyways.
but so given that you're going to have people from a lot of different directions intersecting in the Democratic Party, it makes sense that people would have a separate forum or overlapping places of identity and community that are a little bit more specific than just Democrat.
Right.
But at the same time, it's a little bit like when like Elon Musk talks a lot about terraforming Mars, you're like, why is this guy so interested in terraforming Mars? And what they'll say to you is, we need a backup in case things go badly on Earth. But then you're like, the resources it would take to terraform another planet are minuscule next to the resources it would take to just not screw up Earth. What are you actually after? And what they're actually after is like something they can absolutely control. And
that's exactly. I'm always like, he's just trying to play out his like Robert A. Heinlein fantasy,
Right. But like, I think politically, all of us are in a little bit of a similar spot where it's like, oh man, if I had just had my own party, I could make it exactly the way I want. But I read this beautiful quote once I was in the UNH library. I read a lot of classics. I've always liked classics. And in Antigone, do you know the play Antigone?
I'm familiar with it. It's not one that I've gone through. I always try to remember, like, dude, like I'm still like a mega dumbass. Like there is so much stuff that I like haven't consumed yet. Like it's like I like, it drives me nuts when people are like, oh, you come across as so like articulate and intelligent. I'm like, dude, you have no idea how stupid I am. I try, but like there's like I don't have enough time in the day, dude, to like read every book in a library. You know what I mean? Like
anyone who's honest will tell you how stupid they are. there's no
exactly.
You can't read all the books. It's one of the like I'm so sad you can't read all the books. But in any case, like a quick synopsis of Antigone, right? She's a princess. Basically, and her brothers were engaged in a rebellion against the king of this city, and he killed them, desecrated their bodies in a way that was really offensive to the Greek religion by not allowing them to be buried. And so she went out and buried herself with them as like an ultimate act of defiance. That sort of it's a lot about like the limits of what human authority actually grants you, because there's a divine authority you can fall back on. But the son of the king who's committing these atrocities has a very interesting conversation with his father. The father says, look, I'm the king. Can I just do what I want? Like that's what being a king is. And the son says back to him, a city isn't a city if there's only one voice, So like people want to create their own parties because out of a very natural frustration with like, I want things that are closer to my vision. Right. But like dealing with other people is inherently frustrating.
You're always fired at the libertarians watching. Like,
I mean, on the left, like it's almost famous for this. Like, it's like, we've created our own special group that agrees ideologically. There's a schism. Now we've created 3 separate groups. It like everything just disintegrates. And so like bringing it back to entryism, the question is always like, are the resources that are being employed to create this separate power structure more than the resources that would be required to make progress within the existing system? And I think about that a lot. But also like resources are voluntary, right? We all give our time and our passion to these things. And it's not like they're fungible. So people will put in a lot of resources and work and time, maybe to creating a parallel structure that they could never get enthused enough about the Democratic Party to put in, just because that's not where their passions are. So, it's whenever people talk about entryism versus creating a parallel power structure, I'm always like, wouldn't it take less resources to terraform the party that we have rather than colonizing Mars?
Right. Well, and I mean, my personal like attitude towards it is I'm like, okay, why not do both, dude? Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's no reason to not engage with both aspects of things. It's like you try to make progress when and where you can. And like, this is, I mean, I casually mentioned libertarians a minute ago, but I think this is something that they're fucking great at, man. Is it like they are really good at being like, you know what, we're going to throw everything in the kitchen sink and see what works. You know what I mean? It's like, and they don't get too, I guess, like upset or like dismayed when something fails. They just are like, well, it doesn't matter if this one failed because we got like 800 other options to explore. Like, and that's exactly how the whole like education defunding thing is going right now. It's like, how many different bills, how many different methods are they employing to like, you know, whether it's the EFAs or doing like public school choice or, you know, like there's like a million different ways that you can basically just destroy the whole system. So, and their attitude is like, let's try all of it. You know what I mean? And so I think that there's, you know, like like people probably are aware at this point because I've said that I'm working on it. Like I am doing like another like deep dive video that I'm doing the research for now. And it's like, the joke I made is I'm like, dude, if you thought the weapons video was like if you thought I cooked with the weapons video, that was just an aperitif, like wait for the meal. But there was a really interesting article that I read on PubMed about the sort of like the sociology of libertarians. And it was based around this concept of like, we've really well measured liberals and conservatives. But there's this other group that exists and they don't follow the same like psychological mappings that like a liberal or a conservative does, and there's very notable differences between them. And as I was reading it, I mean, I encourage people to look it up. I think you just literally Google search libertarian sociology.
The forthcoming.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely is like it's an important piece of the puzzle, although like there's way too much going into that fucking thing. But basically I encourage people to go read it because it as much as it's about libertarians, it will also tell you just as much about like conservatives and liberals. You know what I mean? Like, and it's like in that piece, they're using liberal broadly to describe anybody to the left, right? And then like, you know, which is within the context of America specifically, like the United States specifically, because like anybody that follows like international politics understands that like liberal means something very different if you go to Europe. You know what I mean? Like it's they don't have the same definition here as they do over there. And that's in large part because of just like how intensely capitalistic the United States is, like that it's so deeply ingrained in the way this country operates and the culture here that it's like it's almost impossible to imagine something further to the left than like a liberal. You know, again, like air quotes all the way throughout, because it's like
there's like two things, right, with America. Like I think it always pays sometimes to zoom out and remember where you are in history. Like we live in a country where the left was horrendously and violently suppressed for a long time.
Decades, absolute decades.
Just like the focus of internal security services, especially, I mean, because a lot of things were fights over unionism and so like around the turn of the century, in the 25 years before and after the 1900, there was a sense that America would be undermined by European ideologies, and that was closely associated with nativism, right? Because you had people, as we opened up the Great Plains and all that grain started flowing into the industrial core of the Atlantic world, it was actually smashing all of the rural workers in Eastern Europe and Southern Europe and suppressing the grain price and their economy and just like destroying it. And so the boats would come from America bringing grain and taking back farmers who had been crushed. And so you had these vast influxes of workers to the factories in the cities, and the absolute panic that you had, particularly after McKinley was assassinated, about anarchism and these foreign ideologies and socialism and all this stuff. And then, after obviously World War II, when the Cold War really kicked up, the absolute paranoia and the violence. Yeah,
well, I mean, you've got the Soviet Union, which is the other, like the biggest power in the world next to the United States, acting as a competitor, and it's like it becomes the absolute boogeyman. So like anything associated with left-wing ideologies just becomes immediately like that's enemy.
Yeah. And so that second generation after the New Deal really was always having to like distance itself. And then after deindustrialization in the 70s, like as the working class just took it in the neck, there was this huge ethnic backlash against civil rights, and the Democratic Party lost its hegemonic status that it had had since the New Deal. And so you have a whole generation of Democratic politicians that have like really had it ingrained in them. Like they came of age, their entire lives have happened during a long, ebbing of Democratic forces. And
right.
So they've sort of really deeply internalized a lot of like, stay away from, anything that scares, like what did Chuck Schumer? Chuck Schumer said something like he has like a couple in his head who like live in Long
Baileys.
Island.
It's the Baileys.
The Baileys. Anything that would scare the Baileys, you got to like cut that shit off and keep it out. And so,
the voters in the suburbs that he's going to win when he cuts off the working class. And
I think in our generation and younger people, there's like more of a natural resurgence of a full political spectrum. In a way, like it was very truncated after World War II on both the left and the right. They sort of excluded a lot because they were terrified of what extremism had done. At least that was their view. And so we're sort of coming to that. And at the same time, like America is in its second generation of democracy, like actual democracy. Like if you think about the Senate and the college, the Electoral College, what it represented in the South to have an enslaved population that gave you representation, but did not vote. And then after the Civil War, the Jim Crow status quo that continued straight through until the mid 60s was that you always had an undemocratic anchor tethering the ship. From just whatever people actually wanted to have happen. And when you have that tether, it's not only that tether, but like the forces everywhere else in the country that are allied to that tether. It really like creates a lot of policy drag.
Well, and I mean, this actually, it's so funny because, and this is one of those things where I'm like, people need to think about things holistically, right? Like, because that maps like almost directly onto like the state local aspect of New Hampshire, right? You're talking about like the property tax, right? Like the whole underpinning for the property tax and the way that became sort of like this thing and the way we operate. And we've become so detached from like the historical context of why that even existed, right? Like first off, you're talking about a period of time where like the land was still largely farmland, right? And so people were making money off their land. So like the amount of acres that you had literally translated to how much money you could make.
It was a de facto
and
income.
Like right, exactly. And so, and I mean, and even at that, it was like easier. Like there was the whole context of like, well, we don't want to tax like people, you know what I mean? Like so we don't tax income. And it's like, once the economy completely changed the way it operated, right? It becomes like more important to like ask yourself like, hey, wait a minute, is this even an appropriate structure anymore? And then you have people that are like, no, like we need to stick to what the founding fathers decided for our country. And like, it's just like, okay, dude, but like they didn't have the internet. You know what I mean? Like they didn't have like power lines even. You know what I mean? Like you're talking about a completely different world. You're basically talking about like a third world nation. You know what I mean? So you're trying to apply third world laws to a like literally one of the most advanced nations on the planet, and it just doesn't it doesn't track for me. You know what I mean? It's like
really creaky here in New Hampshire. It's creaky, and probably due for some. If we think of ourselves as maybe like the first generation, or like one of the first few generations that's actually living in something like democracy in America. Even though the absolute panic about that is causing the right to like try to dismantle it as fast as they can with the voting rights laws and all that. And we think about ourselves as like one of the first generations that has like a broader acceptable spectrum of politics. We're sort of in a place to refashion a lot of these institutions as we go through, and maybe take like a longer view. So like I think we're at a sort of an interesting place. It's frustrating, right? Because we feel ourselves constantly thwarted and pushed against by the existing structures. But it's also like, yeah, but we're one of the first ones. We're like at a spearhead, and then there's like a big group of people coming after us who are also going to be dissatisfied with these things. But in New Hampshire, I don't know. There's like a lot of things that keep us in place, and one of them is, the project that started before the Free State Project was the Conservative Project that started after World War II. So New Hampshire was very divided between sort of WASPs and Catholic immigrants,
right.
Jewish immigrants, minorities of different types that had come into the state. And it's one of the most Catholic states in the country, I think second only to Rhode Island. And so the Democratic Party was sort of the de facto party for a lot of those immigrants, and a lot of those dissenters of all kinds from sort of like mainline Protestantism. And so there were like liberal Catholics and conservative Catholics, and liberal Republicans and conservative Republicans. We had like a very strong progressive Republican wing in this state, partly because they had just gone all in on Teddy Roosevelt. And it took a long time for that to die. And it died not only because national politics changed, but because people worked for a long time to make it die. The publisher of the Union Leader, William Loeb, was a vociferous advocate of bringing Catholics, conservative Catholics, people of all sensibilities who were conservative, into the Republican Party, and trying to push anyone who didn't fit that into the Democratic Party. He was enormously influential in New Hampshire politics in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And it only really stopped I won't say it stopped, as other forms of media became more important in politics, it waned. But one of the things was always establishing a strong local identity that echoed his conservative beliefs. And so he would advertise New Hampshire and have New Hampshire's identity be defined as more conservative than Massachusetts. Like, this is a tax shelter for people in the Boston economy hub. If you don't like what's happening with liberals in Massachusetts, come here. And so you had a lot of people moving in here after the construction of the highways. And this is, by coincidence, just when there's a lot of racial strife in the Boston area and people are moving out of Boston to the North and South Shore, also to New Hampshire to get away.
Right.
There's a lot of fans of George Wallace, who settled in like Londonderry and Derry and Salem and all those big, Hudson, those big highway commuter towns that sprang up and where the bulk of New Hampshire's population is now located. And it sets a stamp, and the Free State Project does the same thing, where they set a stamp of like, this is our ideological identity as a state. And they work to draw people, not just people who want to be involved in the Free State Project, but people who are angry about masks. There are people who settled in my town during the pandemic who were from upstate New York and angry about masks. And also, by the way, effing hate trans people. They're weird. They're moved in there by Liberty Realty. It's not an accident.
Exactly. Something that you mentioned, I wonder about this, right? Because to your point, I mean, there's a lot of Catholic, presence in the state of New Hampshire, and I genuinely wonder now, and I would have to see demographics on this. I have no data to back up this claim, but I genuinely am curious because I understand that, like after speaking with people that like were involved with the Free State Project, I know that there was sort of a period, like a lot of the initial movers were very much so like Woodstock hippie types that were just like, I just want to go and live in the woods, man. Like,
there's sort of like an extension of a Vermont back to the land kind of thing.
Right. It's like a very it's almost a much more pure concept of like of libertarianism, right? Where it's like very like principled in the sense of like, no, like we can't be just stepping on the toes of other people regardless of who they are, or how they identify, so on and so forth, right?
I remember 10 years ago. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but like just
no, you're good. Please go.
Like, I remember 10 years ago, a Free Stater who was raising money for the Free State Project. He was trans, and he would organize drag queen photo shoots at covered bridges in New Hampshire and sell the calendars to fundraise. And you're like, whoa, where'd you guys go? Like, you don't see
exactly. No, I mean, a lot of them left, but like I remember talking to somebody and they were like, oh yeah, there was this point at like, specifically they were talking about PorcFest. And they were talking about how like all of us, like it was all well and good and chill and mellow for a while. And then all of a sudden new people started moving and they're like, where's my prayer service? Like, where's my morning prayer service at PorcFest? And so with that, I begin to ask myself the question. I'm like, well, yeah, but Catholicism is like, look, like there's plenty of issues with Catholicism. I'm not trying to like get into a big litigation of that particular sect of Christianity, but there is a lot of like very like leftist underpinning to Catholicism if you're just looking at the religion itself and like what it espouses, you know what I mean? Like, and so, but I think the interesting counter to that is the presence of like Protestants that are like evangelical or like Calvinist, you know what I mean? Like if you're talking about like prosperity gospel and or Weber's Protestant work ethic and spirit of capitalism, right? And so like I wonder to what extent that like sort of religious demographic shift has occurred within the state as we've shifted more into this libertarian context. And what would then be interesting to me is to see like, well, what's the over under on that? And then how much of the sort of like a sectorial dispute is being masked by just like the broad label of like advocating for religious freedom, right? Which read Christianity, but it's like I wonder about that. I think it's a very interesting sort of like dynamic. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think you have to be careful in terms of like history because these religions, I think we think about them as like a set of beliefs, but they were much more like cultural markers of groups of people, right?
Right.
And so if you think about like the prejudice that JFK faced, or John King in New Hampshire, there was a big breakthrough of Democratic Catholics in 1962 following JFK's election. John King was the first Catholic governor. Tom McIntyre unseated a Republican and was like the first Democratic senator from New Hampshire since the Civil War. Loeb hated him. The Union leader hated him, but he still won.
No surprise there.
Shit-eating Irishman who was like, Loeb always loses. The Irishman wins again.
Oh my God.
But, there was a lot of like perception of Catholicism as like backwards. Like basically these people were peasants who weren't ready to be citizens of a democracy, and they were moved here, and they're kind of garbage.
Right.
It was sort of like the underlying sense. And to the task that William Loeb had in sort of consolidating them was a lot of in those cultural things, so like prohibition was in some senses just screw you Catholics that have like social customs that involve drinking alcohol. There was like a massive like underpinning of this is like white Protestant Christianity and the foreign filth needs to be reformed. And so like for New Hampshire to get to the point in the 50s where it did try to pass an income tax, Sherman Adams, who went on to be Eisenhower's chief of staff, it didn't get through the legislature. They were trying to modernize their state government, much like all the surrounding states were doing at the time. Like Vermont was doing it, Maine was doing it. They were trying to provide like a steady tax base, and he failed. And he wrote this like famous letter blaming the Catholics because he's they're peasants. They've been abused by government for centuries in Canada and the King's government, and they just don't know what it is to be a citizen. And
Christ.
Then John King becomes the governor, and he's like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to get money from state liquor stores and gambling. And you could just feel like the Protestant 1963 heads exploding. But
totally. How dare you tax our vices?
we can raise funds, but in ways that are acceptable to Catholics.
Right.
And also screw you, WASPs. And so
it just begs the question. Yeah, it just begs the question, like, how much New Hampshire legislation is just one group giving another group the middle finger?
All of politics sometimes seems to be like an organization of prejudices and hatreds, right?
Totally.
Yeah, but so I forget where we were at.
It's okay. I actually, because I think we've taken this really long winding road, but I want to bring it like way back to earlier in the conversation. Because we were talking about, initially, we were discussing sort of like the ways in which specifically related to the Democratic Party, ways in which it's open and the ways in which it's closed. And I think we did a good job talking about the ways in which it's open, but I'm curious to hear that sort of, again, from your subjective experience, what the ways that it's closed are. Like, just to finish that thought.
Yeah. So like in intra-party contests, one of the things that it seems to me that the Democratic Party lacks is like an internal party publication that isn't the CARES, right? Like, I'm not saying it needs like a Pravda or something like that, but it would be nice to have some form of information, because when things are going on in the party, when there are elections or whatever, it's all like whisper networks, social networks. There's no one giving you information, and there's no media coverage of any of it, right? And so what is particularly powerful in a lot of inter-party races, this is what Ray Buckley does, is when you think about the work life cycle of young political professionals, long periods of unemployment are built into it. Like, if you talk to them, like, and I always have coffee with them because like they're the most interesting people to me in the world, and I have a really high opinion of a lot of them. They have like a set of skills and experiences that are totally atypical, because they're like, this is their profession. They do this, like you do whatever it is you do during the day. They bank in saving like 30% of their salaries, because they understand that there's going to be, if they're going to be a professional over years, there's going to be long periods of unemployment. And so after an election is over, there's a lot of people at loose ends. And Ray Buckley will hire them to help organize his chair elections or this or that. And so if you don't have, there's a lot of things money can substitute for, right? Like, if you're not sort of eye-catching, you can buy attention with ads. And in terms of things that are more about like, there's only 600 people in this electorate, or 500 people, 400 people. Having someone who's working full time, making phone calls and talking to people is a huge advantage, unless you're going to put in the sweat equity to do it yourself. And so one of the things that every time an election has come up, Ray Buckley will have someone that he's hired to like work on his reelection. And it's literally as simple as that. It's literally like he's talking to a lot of people. I mean, there's more, because like, there's sort of like, well, this person I respect says this, and this person I respect says this, and this is who's endorsed who. But the
sort of like clout management.
Yeah, sort of. I always sort of fell in with the anti-Buckley crowd. Although because it's a black box, even if you get in at the bottom levels and you have a better understanding of how the whole party functions, the upper levels are still a black box to you, right? Like you don't know exactly how the chair's job works. And it's several cycles before you have an understanding of like, well, what is like the second vice chair do?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but
exactly.
Like
well, and I mean, yeah, they're also quite a bit more decentralized. I think that's another thing that people always like forget about. Like, it's really easy to target Ray Buckley and be like, oh, he's like the progenitor of all of our fucking problems.
Yeah,
Ray Buckley,
he's
you know, like, and it's like.
Right.
It's like, dude, he's just one piece, like one cog in a much bigger system. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
like, so and like, also like, it's not that he's just like in lockstep with everybody either, right? Like, for whatever smoke I have for the guy, right, which there is plenty of, but it's like I also can like discern that like there is a limit to like what he is able to do as that chair, you know what I mean? Like, and a lot of times what he's going to do is very much so reliant on like whatever connections he has to DC or something like that. So in a lot of situations, like his power is simply just the ability to like link two people up so that they can operate separately away from him, and he can go hands off. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think that's something that the Democratic Party is really good at, is being able to like create like social contract LLCs that basically allow them to like be completely insulated from any kind of blowback. You know what I mean? Where it's like it's virtually impossible to follow any kind of like paper trail that would specifically indict somebody over an action or behavior. You know what I mean? Where it's like it might be connected to a much broader system, but the amount of responsibility each person has in that process is very small. So then you're sort of back to like being able to say, oh, look at the left tilting at windmills again, blaming the establishment. And it's like, well, there's truth in that, but it's just like, we don't have the visibility into that black box. So we can't even articulate like the granular nature of those interconnected relationships.
Right. Right. And, you know, it's a lot of it is because it's when you get down to a group of several hundred people, right? Like if you really like think about it, the Democratic Party as a party is probably about 15 or 20,000 people, right, in the state. You know, it's officials, it's local party activists, volunteers who join once a cycle to go canvass once, people who donate money. It's probably 20 to 25,000 people. And as you talk about parts of the structure that rely on less and less people, it's a lot more like, yeah, well, it's like me and my 7 friends.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, it's the lack of visibility is part of it, right? And that allows you to both project onto it things, and also right. So like one of the criticisms I hear a lot from people who are criticizing the Democratic Party is they'll say things like the Democrats did this. And I'm like,
yeah.
Oh yeah, dude, like that the Democrats barely exist. Like,
right. Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's like one person who was chairing the National Senatorial Committee for one cycle whose decision they didn't like. And they're like, I can't believe that the Democrats did this. It's like, meh. You know, it's, but
understandable, but potentially misplaced, right? Like,
right. But so like one of the things I think people need to understand is that the Democratic Party, the state Democratic Party as an organization, is sort of like just a central core. It has 6 or 7 full-time employees, and it acts as sort of a clearinghouse where, as campaign staff are hired, and people are hired in different capacities, they're all technically employees of the party, and that way they can get health insurance, and there's a sort of HR function that the state party can provide. It ends up with having, 200 something employees at the peak of the election, and then it shrinks down to those 7 again. And then there are other full-time employees, but they're employees of different groups that are charged with like House races. So there's the Democratic Victory Campaign Committee that's in charge of recruiting and supporting House candidates. And they have their own full-time employees. And Ray Buckley has no control over what they do at all. And so like, there's been 2 big movements that I've seen when as I've been involved. And that's like, first of all, freeing up some of the information and tools so that walk-on volunteers at the grassroots level are better able to use it, and there's better training for them. And the other one is to integrate things more. 3 cycles ago, the party moved to doing audits for every single election, where they do like a really comprehensive, arduous workup based on interviews and lots of different working groups that write summary reports, and then they consolidate it all into one big Blue Hampshire task force report that comes out the summer after the election. I worked really hard on the subgroup. I co-chaired it with someone. We did the analysis after the 2022 election of how to like what's useful for town committees and how do you support them better, and what information do they need. But it was like a significant chunk of time. People are sometimes so burned out that they're like, I'm not going to do one of those again for a few cycles.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Like, one of the things that keeps coming up out of it is that it needs to be easier to access resources, and it needs to be more integrated. But right. I think the third thing actually gets to where it's less open, because the third thing is about how what's called the coordinated campaign functions. All of the Democrats running in the fall after the primaries are part of the same organization, where it's a combined ground staff. And that's very important in state legislative races, because that ground staff is going to be doing all of the groundwork in your district, but you don't have almost any control over them, because the money all comes from the statewide candidates. Usually our Congress people, so our Congress people and our senators all combine their money and fund this organization along with the governor candidate. And part of that is they have wealthy donors. And like, that's where a lot of the leftist criticism comes from. But also, there's a lot of small donations. Like if you looked at the small donations in your town and where they come from, like it's because they're the most high visibility people, and people only hear about federal politics all day long. And so that's what they care about. They give to those federal races. And totally. The federal delegation ends up driving things. And what that means is they don't care where a vote comes from, because they're in a statewide race. So like, they just want the most number of votes for the least amount of resources, which means you're going to spend a lot of time canvassing like big cities, which really hangs rural Democrats out to dry. And that's where the margin is in the legislature. So there's this constant friction between where the campaign is working and where we need to go to get things done in the state legislature. There's this community of interests. But like, again, it's sort of that's where people donate. So like one of John's complaints, for instance, is that it costs money for him to do things with the party and get resources from it. And that's because the party only has a budget of about $2 million. And they really rely on their candidates to be fundraisers to support the party and translate that into the staff that can give the resources, what resources there are given to the rest of the grassroots. You know, there's no other parties themselves aren't very charismatic.
It's just apparatus, right? Like it's literally just an apparatus.
Right. I mean, like if I called you and I said, hey, Carter, man, can you donate $50? What would be, I'm going to ask for like a kind of painful amount, $250. Would you donate $250 to the New Hampshire Democratic Party? We're working on supporting everyone in the upcoming election. You might be like, and then I would kind of like,
that's a little steep, bro. Like my electricity bill is real high right now.
Right. But like, also if I'm calling you and I'm a paid staff, I need to justify my salary by getting larger donations. I can't just call people and ask for $5, right? And so but if I ask for a candidate that you love and I'm like, man, we need this. Like this is going to not only change our representation. It's going to fundamentally change the direction of the Democratic Party in New Hampshire if this person wins. This is real. And we've already gotten this many donations from people in your town. It's like you piggyback off the parasocial enthusiasm and relationship and trust people feel for popular candidates, and they give you resources. And so that's the way it works. Like, the candidates are the fundraisers under the current structure, and it's set up to work that way.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I think this is actually really, this is really interesting stuff. And this is why, like, I really appreciate talking to you, because like to be able to have that like granular knowledge or because it's like, again, you know, in the same way that everybody pays attention to national politics and that kind of like sets the tone for whatever they understand like activism or like political activity to be, it's like it's missing information. It's not that it's misplaced or like poorly intentioned. It's just that it's lacking all of the context necessary to like truly interact with something. And like, for what it's worth, I mean, like, I think there's very viable critiques to be made of that system. And I mean, at that point, it's like, I'd prefer to see like a totally different method of like funding candidates. You know what I mean? Because I mean, like, for anybody that like cares about like money and politics, like, I think like that dictates why there's like a significant degree of sort of like conservative supremacy, because like you're talking about people that have no problem playing like a zero-sum economic game to basically stomp on the heads of other people to make like copious amounts of money, which then Citizens United totally reifies by allowing them to just like funnel like however the fuck much they want into a super PAC. And so like, that's how you end up with like financial disparity when it comes to campaigns. So like, even it's like within that context, the Democrats are subject to the exact same pain points that the progressives are subject to. They just have a slightly better apparatus to like obtain the funds to do it. Just like for anybody that's watching, we just had like a technical problem, and so there's going to be there was a cut that just happened. I fucking apologize. But like, basically, like, I think what I was trying to say is that essentially you're in this situation where like the Democrats are basically like the Democrats are trying to basically crack the whip at like their candidates, and then furthermore their constituents, to say like, no, you need to like, if you don't support us, then we can't be successful. And then the problem then becomes like, yeah, but like, you guys have been advocating for policies that don't necessarily benefit us because you're so focused on making money to keep going, right? So then you end up in this sort of like interesting feedback loop where like the money is the thing that's really deciding the outcomes. And it's very similar to what progressive candidates, what left candidates that are trying to be more like insurgent in that entryism, that's what they're experiencing, just maybe a slightly lesser degree, because they have like, generations of apparatus built up. You know what I mean? There's a history to the Democratic Party, so people know that name. If there's not a single American that doesn't know the word Democrat. You know what I'm saying? Right. Like, so
like when I start new town parties, I call people and I say, "Hey, there's a new Democratic town party starting," and people know what the hell I'm talking about. Like, right. if I could not cold call 800 people in Loudoun and knock on their door and say, "Hey, I'm part of the Freedom Workers Alliance," there would have to be a lot more. And honestly, a lot of people would just be like, "No, I'm not interested," because people aren't always looking to get into it that deep. There's so much cultural inertia built in to that brand. It's a frustrating thing. Although I will say this, right? So, I think that people often overestimate how much they're boxed out because of money.
Sure.
People, this is my it's not as though we have had progressive insurgents in this cycle or any recent cycles who have worked their way up through public office for long periods of time and spent a lot of time networking and becoming well tied in to substantial parts of the party establishment. And when I say establishment, I just mean like you are on a first name basis with like several of the county chairs. I don't mean like,
yeah,
you know, you're Ray Buckley's dinner guest and Martha Fuller Clark's lunch buddy.
yeah, exactly.
You know, like a lot of people are coming in from the outside with a lot of heat, and they become easy for insiders to dismiss because they don't have they often don't seem to have any idea how things work. It's frustrating because you know, like Thomas Appel, right? Thomas Appel and Andrew Volinsky launched their "we need an income tax" kind of thing. We need some sort of broad-based tax to fund New Hampshire government. And like you're very deeply aware of New Hampshire politics. You understand that like this is the main thing. Like if you're going to have
in a lot of ways, the lineage for that is like the Hager-Below-Fernald bill, right? And
honestly, it's being launched by a bunch of people that are going to die in 15 years. Not
right. It's fair point.
Yeah. And so when I talk to people who are in that group, like who have supported that, state representatives who voted to pursue Thomas Appel's bill, Thomas Appel himself, you know, many people are in that section of the party, right, that are not afraid to stir things up, who want to make deep structural reforms, who have been the core of anti-Buckley voting over the last 6 years, right?
Right.
When I talk to them about John Kuiper, they're like, I mean, would you trust that guy to run a hospital? He's very emotional and changes his mind all the time and doesn't have the sort of staid, quiet, trust me thing that you might want. And also, like, all he does is tear us down. Like, he's so contemptuous of the Democratic Party and slashing that he's just pissed us off too much. And so, like, there's this fundamental disjunction between the sort of parts of the Democratic Party that want to it's too much from the outside.
Right.
People need, like, Karishma Manzoor is launched her campaign, and her entire connection to the Democratic Party had been being on a county committee for 2 years. Jared Sullivan is in the House of Representatives, but also he hasn't been networking heavily with any of the parties. Like, he's not a networker. But I love Jared. I'm not saying that to criticize him. So I'm in this kind of like weird position where I don't want to personally criticize the people, because like they are doing this 1,000% with their one life. They are giving years of the one life they have to these campaigns for Congress. But like, you wouldn't expect someone, regardless of the ideological tilt or the structure of the party or anything, you wouldn't expect someone with these backgrounds to win a Senate race, absent something very special about themselves. Either they're bringing a personal fortune to it, or they're bringing a rock star charisma to it. And like, I remember talking to Steve Marchand, and he said the best thing about being a primary candidate, which is that you spend all your time for a year talking to the people you love and respect the most in politics and listening to them tell you you suck. It's like, it's very difficult. But like, you know, there's a lot of like, well, the system has boxed these people out. And it's like, these wouldn't be the kind of people you would expect to have the support to win absent any establishment. And there is an establishment. And, you know, I think particularly this year, there's a lot of mistaking establishment boxing people out for just normal people who are looking for a sure Democratic victory. Like, if all you care about is a Democratic victory, hey, we got Chris Pappas, and he held down a seat that had been flipping back and forth from Republicans to Democrats, and he took it and he held it in good years and bad years, and now he's running for state senate. Like, he knows how to do this. And so, like, and it's very difficult, right? Because on the other hand, you've watched children dying every day in Gaza, and he's not just like kind of pro-Israel. Like,
he's like very pro-Israel.
He is he goes out of his way.
He's in the tank. Yeah, like, exactly. He's like putting out campaign ads with the AIPAC banner behind him. Like, we're going to be supportive of it.
You don't need track AIPAC for that guy. That he's not quiet about
it. Right.
And so, like, he drives you crazy. And like, if I had to pick out anyone who was going to like torpedo a national minimum wage hike, it would probably be him. Like, he's so moderate that he's really good at, like, he might be like optimally designed to hold that CD1 seat that flips back and forth. But New Hampshire as a whole, we're leaving a lot of money on the table. Like, we could get someone way to the left of him. But like, at the same time, like, when these challenges are difficult, or they don't, like, it's very hard to unseat a sitting congressperson. Like Paige Boschman running against Maggie Goodlander, even absent money, it would be very difficult to unseat a sitting congressperson.
No, that's definitely an uphill battle. And like, and that's the thing, is that like, I can acknowledge the just the political realities of that particular race, you know, and I say this as somebody in CD2, like, Paige 100% has my support, like, no questions asked, like, just because from my perspective, it's like, look, like, I care about the policy, dude. Like, put the policy in the bag, little bro. Like, that is the key thing. Like, I really, like, I, for what it's worth, like, I do not give a fuck about your optics. Like, like, all of that other stuff is just window dressing to me. Like, and the thing I always try to tell people is, I'm like, look, like, I've said this a couple times recently, but it's like, you are literally, like, any voter is one Sunday morning cup of coffee away from being totally inoculated from campaign finance problems. Because all you need to do is sit down. You've already brewed the cup, right? You sit down at your kitchen table or at your couch and you look up who's running in my district, right? And then you get those names and you Google each of those names and you go to their campaign websites and you read their policy platform. And then you, as a free thinking person with a critical capacity, determine which of those platforms resonates with you the most. And then that's who you vote for.
Well, I mean, like, if you think about it, like, we're in we're trapped in like a world of constant campaigning. The money that's pumped into this stuff, you know, and like, even like months of door-to-door canvassing, lawn signs, like, all of this hoopla. If we could just like make a law to force everyone to go to a central location and watch 8-hour PowerPoints and then vote, it could be like, we have 2-day elections, you know? It's like, we give the media like a month's head start to dig up stuff. And then all the information is just presented. You're forced to sit there. There's free childcare. You can't leave. You'll be shot. Then you have to vote. Like, we could get rid of all of this stuff, and it would be comparatively cheap.
This is some real. And careful, you're going to get called a communist. You watch it.
You have no option but to democracy today. Like, all things will be shut, even if you escaped. We have like guards roaming in shifts on the outside to catch you. You know, like in ancient Athens, like when it was time to go to the forum and vote, they had like archers from Central Asia who were like super like deadly archers, basically like snipers. And they would catch you if you were trying to evade the forum. They would put a big red paint slash down your toga so everyone knew that you had tried to skip out, and then they would like keep an arrow drawn on you and walk you in. Like, there's no option.
As a friendly reminder, everybody, this is before China invented struggle sessions. Like, you know, like
it puts a whole different spin on the trial of Socrates, right?
Yeah. You think this is authoritarian, buddy? Like, let me tell you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like it's ridiculous, and so like it's our disinterest that makes money powerful in politics. But you can't curse at human nature.
Right.
You can just try to change it a little bit, and you know. But at the same time, boy, wouldn't it be nice to not feel like you had no options, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, when I vote, a couple of the things, these are just like some of my loose reflections. Like, I voted for John in the last election, but like my second choice was very much Joyce Craig because she had an independent base of support from the sort of central party nexus. Maggie Goodlander has many, many faults and redeeming qualities. She's like human in politics, but she has an independent. She's not dependent on the sort of like Shaheen nexus, right?
Oh, I mean, her family is like part owners of of Fenway Park or something like that.
Yeah, there's like some deep generational. Like,
she's got her own damn money. You know what I mean? Like,
there's some deep generational wealth. Like, I feel like she's not in like the super wealthy, and her family isn't. And like her father, her parents were deeply engaged in national politics. She has like a very strong regional base in a part of the state that was growing and expanding economically, right?
Yeah.
So like, when you look at that, and then when you look at like Jared Sullivan, who lives in the North Country where very few people are, and in his political career had not had a chance to like establish much name recognition or networks locally in sort of Coos County, you see like the contrast, right, between like someone who brings a lot, because like the party is relying on these people to bring a lot to the game because they're going to be funding the whole party operation that like sluices back through to the grassroots. And so, and they want to win. Like, the Democrats in New Hampshire usually lose. And the reason we don't think that they're just a minority party that's always going to permanently lose is because we have a handful of people that have been able to win statewide races. Jean Shaheen is the most successful Democratic politician of her generation. Tom McIntyre was the most successful Democratic politician of the previous generation. These people almost always win when they're on the ticket. They're in polls. They're usually the most popular people in New Hampshire politics, and that's what brings status. Like, success brings status. And one of the things, I feel like I'm talking a lot about the sort of inaccuracies of left criticism is these people get attacked rightfully, right? For like pretty much anyone in power deserves a lot of criticism, but the extent to which the system is closed is sort of exaggerated because they're so focused on the money, when really like anyone who can win, who can produce success would have equal standing. Like, I feel like Chris Pappas, his support isn't because people are passionate about Chris Pappas. Most people never even got to the point where they're like actually considering an alternative to Chris Pappas. And I thought your interview was really great with was it Peter Leishman? When you asked him about John Kuiper, Peter.
Oh yeah, I mean, it wasn't really. It was more of just like it was at one of those listening sessions, which they've been, like, say what you will about Peter or Jonah for that matter. Like, I have a plethora of criticisms for both of them. You know what I mean? Right. Like, seriously, like, I don't like. It's like, dude, just because I put those guys on camera doesn't mean that I agree with them. You know what I mean? Like,
this should be. I'm gonna make like a smart trailer. You can excerpt this. People that this guy points a camera at, it's not because he agrees with everything they say. He's just trying to get you better informed. Like,
I literally, like, I just want people to see what these people are saying so that they can make up their own damn mind.
But like Peter's comment was very he said we only have one candidate for governor, and he said, well, what about John Kuiper? And he had not even gotten in his mind to a point where he would consider between Cindy and John, because he was only going to choose in his mind the candidate that had a shot to beat the Republicans. And when you look at like Karishma Manzoor, a lot of people are not getting to a point where they're choosing between Chris Pappas and Karisma Manzoor, because they look at Karisma Manzoor and what was she able to fundraise? $80,000 so far in her campaign.
I haven't been keeping track of that as much, but yeah.
Yeah, John Sununu, with like one of the strongest names in New Hampshire politics, who has previously won this very seat that he's running for, and has 5 million on hand and will probably have 20 million more dumped on his side in the general election. And they're like, yeah, like this guy's got an AR-15, she's got a squirt gun. I'm not going to go with her because it matters whether a Democrat or a Republican wins, even if the Democrat is Chris Pappas. I think that's where most people are at. And it's just, it's very,
I mean, right? I hear that procedural argument, like 100%, like, and this is generally, this falls within sort of like the broader critique that I have of like leftists, like, and I say this as somebody who like adheres to that, you know what I mean? Like, I think like in that sense, like, it's like, I'm on that side 100%, like just personally, right? Like, and that, again, that does not necessarily translate into like the content that I produce all the time, right? Because like, I don't, like, in a lot of ways, like, I don't view this whole channel as like an arm of propaganda, you know what I mean? Like, it's a mechanism to get people exposed to concepts, right? So like, that's, you know, like, literally, like, I'm talking to you immediately after the last interview that I had was with Rat, the chairman of the Communist Party of New Hampshire. You know what I mean? Like, so like, I hope people are able to understand that, like, I'm invested in speaking to just about everybody within a good faith context, because like, I want everybody to be able to critically entertain every single idea. Right now, my personal critique that falls into this category is like, look, I understand the procedural arguments of like, we need to win, right? Like, I can totally like empathize with that concept for a moment, right? But then that sort of flips around a little bit when I get to a point where I'm like, okay, but if I go turn on NHPR and I listen to Morning Edition, where it's Rick Ganley interviewing Josh Rogers about his assessment of the governor's race. Mm-hmm. Right. This happened a couple months ago, specifically the what I'm referring to here.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
And I was listening to it and I was like, and again, like, I don't want to disparage Josh Rogers, because he does good work too. Right. But the problem that I have is that like, another thing to point out here is that like, do not attribute to malice that which can be just as easily attributed to ignorance or like horse blinders. Right? From being inside a bubble and just being myopic. And that was the conversation between Rick and Josh. Rick's asking Josh what he thinks about the race or whatever. And Josh is talking about the primary as though it's some sort of foregone conclusion. And the problem I have with that, in the same way that I had a problem with Peter saying what he said in front of that his constituents in town, is I'm like, you guys have a certain degree of institutional power. And when you tell voters that the primary is basically not something that you need to be paying attention to, then you're completely defeating the point of the primary. And that is anti-democratic inherently. The most democratic part of the electoral process is the primary. That's the whole point. So like, in those scenarios, it is so incumbent upon those people that exhibit any degree of power. I don't care if you're getting paid $100 a year or not. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care how little power you feel like you have as 1 against 399 in the state house at like $200 on a like whatever it is, like the like biannual interval. Like, I don't really give a shit. You are casting votes for thousands of people in your constituency. If that's not power, I don't know what is. And like, or if you are a journalist with a state branch of a national organization, right? Like, that is power. And so when you say something flippantly like that, and you don't like adhere to the standards of power or projected objectivity, right? You are putting your thumb on the scale. And
Well,
that's
here's-
something that I take
Right.
issue with. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because it's like
Well-
that reinforces the establishment. And then just to finish the thought, it's like, look, if you keep going with piecemeal candidates, right? If you keep going with people, it's like, oh yeah, well, we're going to vote for Chris Pappas because we know he's got the money and the ability to win. It's like, yeah, but he's also backing Israel. And
Right.
that is a 90-10 issue against Israel right now for the Democrats, which is going to, in the long term, undermine their project. So then I'm starting to think further down the line. And I think, look, if you guys continue to fail in this way by putting up candidates that are going to back things that your constituents genuinely hate, like on a guttural level, then like you will reproduce Trump but worse with Tucker Carlson on the national stage. And that's the concern that I have if I'm like gaming it out in the long run. You know what I'm saying?
That's absolutely, dude. Like, you couldn't have said better what it means when you have a power structure that isn't responsive to change. Because that's the problem, right? Like, you end up winning fake races, and it leaves you out of touch and untalented, and you get slammed down the line. Like, you can keep it going for a little while, and then you get smashed.
Right.
But like, three things, right? So like, the Democratic Party on Israel is really having a pretty serious crack up that's almost like 1968 over the Vietnam War. Like, that's how much of, like, and I remember Tom McIntyre talking about this going in his 1968 reelection. He was pro Vietnam War, as was the democratically elected president, as were many of the Democrats of his generation. And it was like a wrenching internal thing, right? And so like, because it wasn't just like, oh, is this little adventure in Southeast Asia a good idea or a bad idea? Like, major worldview things had to get broken to have someone change their mind about the Vietnam War, right? Coming out of World War II, where we were the good guys and we were standing up to communism and we were like protecting things. And if we withdrew, it would destroy our credibility and the domino theory and all this stuff. Like, it's a little bit similar with Israel, right? Like, there's a whole generation that grew up thinking about Israel in a certain way. And for them, it's incredibly painful to change. And it's easier for young people because we just kind of happened on the scene and we're like, what's all this? You know?
Yeah, totally. I hear you.
There's no whatever. I mean, obviously it's very painful for some people that have like strong feelings, but like for those of us that are not personally tied to Israel, it's a little bit more like, I think Ezra Klein said recently, like, you got to like focus on what's actually happening. Like, it's a very interesting, I know this is the face everyone makes when they talk about Ezra Klein. I think he's very interesting because he's an internal bellwether. He's often the first edge of a major shift in the establishment. Like, remember when he came out against Biden, and then Nancy Pelosi came out against Biden, and then Biden retired. Now he's
him and like Matt Iglesias are just like these weird like liberal dipsticks that like you just pull them out of the tank every once in a while. Oh, how are we doing, guys?
Yeah. They occupy a very interesting place in American life. But so that's one point. It's there's like a generational thing going on. But secondly, Karishma, there's a tendency when we talk about these things. Yeah, that was not a great moment for Rick Ganley. At the same time, if he's reporting on a race and one candidate has almost no resources, name recognition, or support, and the other candidate has all of the name recognition, money, and support, and he doesn't say that, is he not reporting the news? And so it's like, it's a little bit like, does he have to like actually hide news from people? Like, and so when people critique it, like, you are absolutely right. Like, that is it's inappropriate and anti-democratic. At the same time, Rick Ganley isn't the reason Karishma has very little money, name recognition, or support.
No, you're absolutely correct about that. And the only look, like if it's just, like I have any fucking say in this. But like,
imagine if we were all important,
Yeah, exactly. No, but I mean, for what it's worth, right? Like if I were the one that was handling that situation right there, like, because again, like I don't believe in hiding the truth or reality from people. Like, I think it's important to dictate that, even when it's like when it doesn't align with what I believe. Right. So within that scenario, I would have, if I had been Josh Rogers in that interview sitting there, I would have been like, look, here's the money side of things. The other aspect is that there seems to be a broader cultural shift that's occurring, and the platform positions that Karishma Manzoor is advocating for are much more in line with the polling data that's coming out of the base, which provides a very interesting quandary for voters and Democrats alike, which is, who is the candidate that is truly viable in this scenario? Is it the candidate that's more aligned on the policy issues of the constituency, or is it the candidate with the financial and institutional backing to win a race under a traditional measure? And I think that's the question that needs to actually be posed to the voters. And so, end quote. And that would be the way that I would pitch it to an audience, right? And if I was really trying to actually consider like a fairness doctrine, like conception of like reporting on a dynamic, right? Is that like, because that's the portion to me that's left out, is that we're talking about the viability within the context of money, but we're not talking about what people actually give a shit about, which is like policy that would meaningfully impact their lives in a positive manner, which they advocate for, again, when polled directly on those particular issues. And I think that reframes the problem for listeners, for viewers, for readers, whatever, so that they're able to make a much more informed decision, as opposed to like being the horse led to water and then being like, you can either drink or you cannot vote. You know what I mean?
So like this is in sort of discussing entryism and creating parallel power structures. It's very easy to very quickly say, oh, well, look, the media establishment's against her, Yeah. But like, was it, it's sort of like, you overestimate how closed the system is. Like, the system is closed in some ways, right? It's less democratic than we would like. But on the other hand, if you just look at the success of, or lack of success of, certain candidates, and you don't factor in that they have very little track record, very little name recognition, they haven't lived lives in politics for more than a few years, it's not like the obvious candidate is being overlooked in favor of the establishment candidate. These are like not obvious candidates to win heavily contested statewide office.
Right.
So like, I think, and that's only important to me. Like, I agree with you 1,000%. Like, on basically everything you've said. What I'm concerned about is that people overestimate how closed the system is, and that orients them towards a certain future action, right? So like, if the problem is that the Democrats control their own primaries and the entire system's closed and they're going to destroy anyone who even tries to step out of what I view as the straitjacket of the establishment, then I'm not going to try to think of ways to create organizations that boost progressive candidates. I'm not going to, if I do create a parallel power structure, I'm not going to be interested in doing what DSA in New York did, which was take certain politicians, boost them in primaries, get Zohran Mamdani elected to the New York Assembly, from which he could then turn and say, look, man, I have experience in the Assembly, I'm worth paying attention to, and then support him in the Democratic primary in New York. Like, it's that kind of like, you have to win elections and you have to sponsor candidates through their life cycle who will then cycle up into statewide races. People always want to start at the top because it's what's most visible. Like John has an interesting argument, right? That it's very hard to cycle up through and gain institutional experience in New Hampshire because it's hard for a working class person to put in the hours, right?
Right.
At the same time, like, we are friends with very many people on New Hampshire Talk who are state representatives. Like, Paige is a state representative. The idea that you have to be a millionaire to be a state representative is not true. Like, otherwise,
you just have to have the support network in your private life that will allow you to be able to do that, right? And like, and Paige has talked about this a bunch too. Like, and seriously, like, mega credit to her and her whole family for supporting her through that. Like, that is that is huge.
You grew up, your mother was a state representative.
And I mean, it's like my mother was a graphic designer, she was like a freelance graphic designer. So she was able, like, because of her profession specifically, she was able to carve that out. But like, dude, like, I was not rich growing up. Like, what are we talking about? You know what I mean? Like,
if more people were involved in their local Democratic Party and did fundraising, so state representatives didn't have to fundraise for their races. And if John Kuiper was able to implement the thing, paid work, crazy idea of paying people for their work. These are both things that would force open the doors so more people could come in. But at the same time, it's not as though it's impossible to find progressive candidates and foster them, particularly if you're creating a parallel organization that's going to do that. And I think that's like the most constructive thing you can do. I feel like a lot of work is is bled off into other directions. And I think what New Hampshire really needs is sort of more organization and particularly fundraising around supporting progressive candidates. I think there's too much black and white thinking, like, you have to get checks from billionaires or you're not going to go anywhere. Like, there are a lot of lawyers and doctors who, even under like a very Marxist sense, are in the proletariat.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I mean, like, their relationship to the means of production are very, like, it's no different than a factory worker. And
I mean, like, the median income in the state is $99K. Like, if you are making less than $99K, make no mistake, you are in the proletariat. Like, I'm sorry, dude. Like, it's just how it is. That's all.
It's weird. Like, our discussion of class gets really like tied into a whole separate metric, which is the American income scale. And so people are out here trying to establish trust with voters by talking about how their car is broken and they can't pay to fix it. And I don't know if, like, voters necessarily love that because it makes you look like an unsuccessful person. But also, like, I think there's like a broad middle class that could be tapped and no one really knows. You don't know how to tap them and you're not working on an organization to do it. And just a little bit of that at the beginning of a race suddenly pops it up. Like, if the first filing period you've raised $100,000 instead of $10,000, then Josh Rogers is not going to, people are going to be like, oh, well, maybe they're serious, and they treat you like a serious person.
Sure.
And so, like, I think having people with longer experiences in politics and more organization to support progressive candidates would get us out of this cycle where we're heavily reliant on sort of the local gentry to come in with their resources and connections and essentially bankroll and motivate this whole structure. Like, when we think about what kind of party we would want to be in if we are stuck in two parties, organization can offset personal resources to a large degree, and we're not organized.
100%.
Like,
and I don't think that's something that the left is, like, particularly in disagreement with at all. I think that is the fundamental argument that a lot of them are making when they're saying, like, we need to set up parallel networks, is because it's like when we work together, we can, pool our resources. And dude, exactly.
It's like, I always say, like, everything is networks. And so like, there's, the Democratic Party is one institution within the broader left side of American politics. And one of the most important things is, especially in New Hampshire, right, where it's like you're going to keep running into the same people. Like, you and I will know each other forever now that we know each other.
Yeah, most likely.
Yeah, like we'll be talking about crap in like 2060. We'll be like, these kids are screwing it up.
Jackasses. Yeah.
Yeah. We fixed all this in the 2040s.
Yeah.
but like, there's a lot of using people instrumentally. And because we do so much of our political discussion online where people are essentially disposable, it's just like, F you, you know, and then you block them and you're done.
Right.
John Kuiper will be with us forever.
Chris
Pappas will unfortunately be with us forever, whether he's in office or not. And like, he's also part of the broader left community. Like Chairman Rat will be with us forever, and they're part of the broader leftward community. And when you think about what kind of culture is going to be the best culture for organizing within, so that we can have people instead of money and resources dictating how things work, you want to be able to cooperate with as many people as possible and organize with as many people as possible and disagree strongly, but not have it destroy those personal relationships.
Well, and I think, you know, I think you are correct about that. What I want to caveat with it, you know what I mean? Like it is not a disagreement so much as it's just like I think this is the part that gets glossed over is that like everybody, not just conservatives, everybody has become more reactionary. Right? Because we are so inundated with so much stuff all the time, right? Like our brains were not built to consume smartphones, right? Like what do you call it? Like the anxiety box or whatever.
Your anxiety rectangle.
Yeah, your anxiety rectangle, right? So like we're not built for this. Like we have not evolved as a species for like thousands of years, right? Like we are the same as those cave dwellers. It you know, like that's no different. So but we're suddenly thrust into this situation where like we're given all these like tools and apparatuses, and we're giving way more information than we're capable of like consuming, and that creates a certain amount of like weirdly in like by drinking from the fire hose you experience a degree of atrophy, right? Like that's something that just happens as a byproduct of being like overstimulated and overwhelmed, especially when the vast majority of information coming at you is like terrifying. You know what I mean? Like, and again, like that is ubiquitous regardless of your political affiliation, right? If you're a conservative, it's the brown people. If you're a libertarian, it's the government. If you're the left, it's the government.
I was on a big group call with like 200 people, and Ray Buckley was like giving an update, and I didn't realize that I was unmuted, and I had literally just watched the video of that Syrian graduate student in Boston being kidnapped. And Ray Buckley was talking about long-term statistical trends, and he's like, it's still trending in the right direction for us. And he started telling this story about Canterbury in 1980, and I just like, fuck you, Grandpa. It turns out like I was unmuted with everyone, and like I you know, he doesn't know who I am, or he doesn't care about me, but I wrote him an apology email, and he wrote me a very nice email back saying like, you know, I'm a gay man of a certain generation, and, you know, being called grandpa is actually kind of novel for me because I never thought I would have kids. But
I'm sorry, that's incredible. That's a great story.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think like everybody gets reactionary, and it means that like at that point you're just so fucking stressed out that all you want to do is like find the simplest solution, right? Like you're like there's no way it's this complicated. There has to be a simpler path. And so that is the track that you follow, and it's easy to point at a boogeyman. And like my thing is, I'm always like, look, like especially when I like if I post videos that get people like really, really upset, right? Like I am always in a state of having to remember like, okay, everybody's like hurting a lot right now. You know what I mean? Like emotionally, psychologically, like this is a thing that's happening. And like, I can like look, like I can absorb some hits with people that are like frustrated and like on like just a reflexive manner are like, I'm going to shoot the messenger right now. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, like, you know, I've got a bulletproof vest on today, so we're fine.
Turns out I woke up, you know, white and male.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Exactly. Dude, that's oh God, that's the other fucking rub. Yeah. So, but it's like, look, I understand. I empathize with that because like I have those days myself. Like, dude, I always like part of my morning routine is to, like before I'm going to work in the morning, I wake up, I make my coffee, I make my breakfast, and I listen to the New York Times Daily. Right. And like the amount of times that I have wanted to just like completely yeet my kitchen island like out the window because of what I'm hearing is like I am starting to lose count. And like, but it's like I have to sit there and I have to remember like, okay, yeah, but these people exist. Right. Like this whole system exists. And if I don't sit here and try to like, dude, I am going to lose track of how many times I say you need to read The Art of War. Like you have to think about things strategically, right? Like there is a certain degree where, and this is what I say, like about like when I think back on that PubMed article that I read about the libertarians, it's like, you do have to like set things aside. Sometimes you have to like put down the empathy, which is such an important driver, right? It's like it's a great place to start from, right? Because it can inform exactly like the direction in which you're moving with your policy. You're like, I want to help people, right? Like I want to do good for people, like, and that comes from empathy. Right. That's your origin point. And that's a great starting point. But that is not a tool that is going to carry you all the way to the end. It's great to bring it back around at the end once you've gotten to where you need to go. But there is a very important process to understand that like there is a certain amount of sort of like dissociation that needs to occur in the process on the personal identitarian level and get into the sort of like more procedural, like mechanical, mathematical process of like, how do I achieve power, and understanding there will be a certain amount of distasteful stuff that has to occur. There's going to be a certain amount of like discomfort that I'm going to have to sit with as I walk through this process in order to get to where I want to go. That's going to mean biting my tongue in scenarios that I really would much prefer to not bite my tongue about, because it's going to undermine the entire project that I'm aiming for. And like, it is totally okay to hide your power level, dude. You know what I mean? Like it is totally fine to like save some of your ammunition. You know what I mean? Like for down the road and to like act in that measured way. And that's the part of like, and I can say all that and still say that like, yes, like if you were to look at like all of the positions that I advocate for, like, I think it's fair to call me a democratic socialist. I don't necessarily like adopt the label. Yeah. Like it's very fair to call me a socialist. Again, I don't necessarily adopt the label, but like, I'm not going to argue with somebody if that's how they want to describe me. Like, fine, dude, I don't give a shit. Like you call me what you want to call me, because to my point, if you are advocating for a collection of policies that amount to a label, then it stands to reason that you will be labeled that, and you need to be okay with that. And if you're not okay with it, then you need to change your positions. And so like, I accept that premise when turned back upon me, and like, so all to say, like, this is about like, if we really want to win, then certain amounts of that need to be set aside. And that's why I think hearing about like from somebody who's more like, in a sense, middle oriented. And again, I don't mean middle in terms of like on a grayscale spectrum. I mean like middle in terms of a color wheel. You know what I mean? Like, and that's
let me
or like a spherical Venn diagram.
a lot of my public communication is based around so like my like overwhelming I don't want to say insight, my direction, right, is heavily based on being involved in the grassroots of the New Hampshire Democratic Party in years when it won at the federal level and lost decisively across the board at the state level. Right. And like, I have conversations with people where I'm like, hey, remember when the Democrats passed that paid family and medical leave policy? This is a conversation I had with a doctor. And I was like, they passed that paid medical and family leave policy, and the Republicans described it as an income tax. And wouldn't that have helped your patients? And they're like, that would be amazing for my patients. I had no idea that happened. I'm like, it was literally the focus of an entire governor's election. Like, That's how much people aren't paying attention to the state level. Like,
Right.
this is a doctor with like a serious thing that would influence the lives of her patient, like things she cares about, and high education person, zero idea anything happened, so like, like sometimes, like, I would talk with Paige, and Paige is like, well, shouldn't we, have like bold policy ideas that we file bills for to give people an idea of what we care about? And I'm like, yeah, but like no one knows, which is why, like, your work is great. Like, a few more people know. It's why, like, New Hampshire Talk is great, because a few more people know. You're drowning in obscurity to a huge degree. And so I'm like, okay, well, if I want to make people more powerful, I need to like key them in to the place where they're most powerful, which is state and local politics, because you can't, like, the impact any of us have on federal stuff is minuscule. And then, okay, well, what part of state and local politics? And I think we've seen like a whole legislative session where people have signed in and testified, and it had no impact, because Republicans know that they'll probably win at the state level again. And so totally. why would they cave? Like, people are like, everyone who testified at the bill testified against it, and they still said yes. It's like, yeah, because they're going to win the next election. Like, the voters are going to vote them in. They're not performing for you, the people in the room. So like, that's not always super effective. The most effective thing is changing who is sitting in that seat. Like, pound for pound, minute for minute, dollar for dollar, the most leftward motion is achieved by changing who sits in the seat. And this is why I tell people, get involved in your local Democratic Party, because you directly will do something directly that changes what happens in a legislative seat, which trickles up into the entire legislature. Like, and so like, everything I say, like, I don't talk about national politics a lot. I don't talk about ideology a lot. You might be surprised by how far left I am. I seem centrist and sort of middle of the road, because I'm talking about extremely practical things, because I'm a father of 3, and I have thought very, very carefully about, I have 15 minutes. What can I do that's going to move the needle somewhere? And like, pound for pound, that's where the needle gets moved. Donate money to your local House candidate, join your local Democratic committee, like, moving that from an R to a D. I don't even care what effing kind of D it is. Like, there's nothing they're going to do with those minutes and those cents. They're going to have as much leftward motion as that. When we get to a point where the Democrats have a majority in the legislature and a governor more than 10% of the time, then we could move on, to something further. And like, there's direct action stuff. Like, direct action stuff is also extremely useful, right? And I don't want to like downplay that. Like, mutual aid, the protest stuff around the Merrimack facility, none of that stuff happened through like sort of normal politics. Like, that was direct action stuff. So I don't want to downplay that. But like, in terms of the formal political power structure, it doesn't matter if you're a communist or just the most centrist Democrat ever. The thing that makes the most motion is the same thing. It's just, we're stuck at this moment in history, in this particular place, on this date.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like, I don't want to hold you too much longer, so we'll probably close out here in a moment. But like, because we've been going for a hot minute. But like, but you said something like months ago that I was like, this is like the most salient take I will see this month about state politics. And it was like, your enemy is not the blue bar or the red bar. Your enemy is the gray bar, which is, I don't know. Like, I'm unaware. I have no opinion. Right? Like, that is the actual opposition. And then like, another sort of like addendum on what you were just saying is like, and people love to, I absolutely agree that I think there's like most certainly a place for like sort of like populist left candidates, like say Graham Plattner, to be successful in a state that's otherwise pretty, like everybody thinks Maine's blue. It's not. Like Maine's very conservative. And so the fact that he is like just so insanely crushing it in that state really like proves the point that strategy is viable, right?
Right.
There's a lot of optics that go along with it. The counter to that is that like you needed a safe seat held by Joe Crowley in order to get AOC. Right? Like that's the other side of it. So like I am more than willing to entertain both strategies because again, to go back to sort of the broader libertarian concept of like, we're going to try everything.
Right.
And if one thing fails, we don't get disparaged about the failure of that one thing.
Right.
We just track the next option and push on that instead. And we push
bold
on all
and
of them
persistent
simultaneously.
Experimentation, as FDR said, bold and persistent experimentation.
Exactly. This is all an iterative process, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But
like I said, like I think the extent to which people are boxed out is way overplayed at this particular moment. And it's because there's such a huge cultural political memory of the 2016 primary as seen through the ardent Bernie supporters' eyes. And it's not entirely supported by what happened, although it was very unfair. And it's certainly, if you take that as a template for everything that ever happens, you're leaving a significant amount of money on the table. Like I said, like I feel like the extent to which things aren't open is really, like there's a reason why a lot of our progressive candidates in New Hampshire haven't been endorsed by Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, even though they have endorsed Graham Plattner. Like, and that's the question you need to like, well, how can we do that better next time? You know, how do we boost someone so that they get into that stratosphere where it's worth, that's, you got to point yourself at the right problem. I want people to stay like, because if you're boxed out of the Democratic Party, that's nothing you can't do very much about that. But if it's a question of organizing and getting like a better organization behind candidates as they launch, well, David and Carter can do something about that. And anyone can do something about that. And so like, you got to like focus on a pragmatic, things that you can do.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's it. There needs to be a degree of like realism and sort of like, you know, materialism when it comes to these things and understanding like, look, like we don't like, I encourage anybody, please go start the communist revolution tomorrow. Be my guest. I like you like I will sign up, but you know what? Like it's got to work. And I have not seen anybody make it happen yet. So like when the day comes, sure, I'm there for it. But until we hit that point,
people
like
will
you know,
vibe with a left message and like, oh yeah, Bernie could totally carry Kentucky. Great. I mean, we have a lot of red towns here in New Hampshire. Become the Democratic chair of that red town and flip it. Let's see. Like people will give you weight as you achieve success. So,
well, and we had a good example just recently. We you know, why am I blanking her name right now? Holy shit. The state house seat that just flipped from, it was
Bobby Boudman.
Bobby Boudman, thank you. God, I don't know why that, like, just all of a sudden it's been a week. But I mean, like that, you know, like, look, these are very real political possibilities. I think the other thing about Bobby Boudman was she had like been there. You know what I mean? She was like really involved in the town and like had tried previously and failed more than once. And like shifted down and did like town stuff more really, like she had built that trust.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, well, and I do think that like, there's weight there.
Contrast that with someone who had just maybe moved to town and said, I'm a social democrat and I'm the only one running and you guys have to support me. And they don't get much traction. And then they're like, well, F the Democratic Party. They didn't support me. I'm going to go form my own third party. And it's like, no, you got to be Bobby Boudman, man. You got to like,
You got to build the trust.
Turn in it and work at it and like make relationships and have a history.
Yeah, you got to get out there.
Yeah. So anyway.
Right. No, awesome. David, thank you so much. This has been absolutely delightful.
Coffee sometime.
Yeah, definitely. You got it. All right, y'all. That does it. Fun conversation. We went long today, but that's good because I think we talked about a lot of important stuff. So at any rate, I did all the housekeeping stuff up front. So you guys know the deal. Subscribe, all that crap, and we'll catch you on the next one later.